Ragnar Lothbrok, a name that echoes through the centuries. Was he a real king or just a legend? To the sons who followed him, he was both. He was a father, a warrior, and a man whose ambitions would set his children on a path to conquer nations. But before Björn could become Ironside, he first had to be a son of Ragnar. Ragnar's sons grew up in the shadow of their father's legend. Among them Björn, Ivar, Hvitserk, and Sigurd. Each was different. One would become a king. Another, a legend without bones. But when the news of their father's death reached them, they put aside their differences. Together they swore an oath. Their father's legacy would not end in a snake pit. It would be forged in blood and fire across England. Among Ragnar's sons, one stood out for his strength in battle. His name was Björn. He earned the nickname Ironside because, as the legends say, he seemed impossible to wound. His limbs were like iron. He would grow to become one of the most feared Vikings of his time, leading raids across Europe and setting his sights on the greatest city of all, Rome. But Björn did not walk this path alone. By his side was his foster father, a cunning Viking chieftain named Hastein. Hastein was old, experienced, and ruthless. He knew the ways of war and trickery. Together, this unlikely pair, the young warrior and the old fox, would plan the most daring Viking expedition of all. In 859, Björn and Hastein did what no Viking had done before. They gathered 62 ships and sailed into the Mediterranean, past Gibraltar, past the Moors, into the heart of the Old World. For 3 years they raided Spain, Africa, France. They burned cities and gathered treasure. They lost 40 ships in battles, but the survivors grew rich. No Viking fleet had ever gone so far. No Viking had ever seen such wealth. But the greatest prize was still ahead. A city they believed was Rome itself. 3 years later, only 20 ships returned. But those ships were filled with gold, silver, and silk from distant lands. Björn had become a legend. He had fought Moors, sacked cities, and sailed further than any Viking before him. His name was spoken across Europe. But the story that would be told for centuries was how he tried to capture Rome. How he used a clever trick to breach the walls of a city. That story made him immortal. This is the story of Björn Ironside.
According to the 13th century tale of Ragnar's sons, Ragnarsona with a QTTR, Björn was the son of Ragnar Lodbrok and his third wife, the wise and beautiful Aslog, daughter of the legendary hero Sigurd the Dragon Slayer and the shield maiden Brynhild. His brothers were Ivar the Boneless, Hvitserk, and Sigurd Snake in the Eye. He also had half-brothers from Ragnar's first marriage, Eric and Agnar. It was a family destined for greatness and for bloodshed. The nickname Ironside has a story of its own. According to the Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus, writing around 1200, Björn earned it through combat. During a battle, he inflicted great slaughter on the foe without hurt to himself, gaining from the strength of his sides, which were like iron, a perpetual name. Other versions suggest his mother Aslog gave him magical protection, making him invulnerable to weapons. Whatever the origin, the name stuck, and it speaks to Björn's reputation as a warrior who could not be stopped. The sagas tell that Björn and his brothers grew restless in their youth. They left Sweden to conquer Zealand, Jutland, Gotland, Erland, and all the surrounding islands. They settled at Lidra in Denmark, with Ivar as their leader. These were young men proving themselves, and they were just getting started. The sagas tell a dramatic story of Björn's early years. When Ragnar appointed a vassal named Eystein Belli as king of Sweden, Björn's half-brothers Eric and Agnar demanded that Eystein submit to them. Eystein refused and killed them in battle. When the news reached Björn and Hvitserk, they were playing a board game called Tafel. They immediately mustered an army and sailed for Sweden, joined by their mother Aslog, who led cavalry across the land. In the battle that followed, they killed Eystein and avenged their brothers. This story may be legend, but it reveals something important about Björn's character. He was loyal to his family, quick to act, and formidable in battle, qualities that would define his entire career. But the most important relationship in Björn's life was with a man named Hastein. In the sagas, Hastein is described as Björn's foster father, a seasoned Viking chieftain who taught him the art of war. Together, they would become one of the most successful raiding partnerships in Viking history. Hastein was cunning, experienced, and utterly ruthless. He was the strategist, while Bjorn was the warrior. Their partnership would take them further than any Vikings had ever gone before. But who was the historical Bjorn? Contemporary sources give us a different picture. The Annals Bertiniani, one of the most reliable Frankish chronicles, mentions a Viking chieftain named Berno, who was active in the Seine Valley during the 850s. He is first recorded in the summer of 855, raiding along the Seine with another Viking leader named Sigtryg. Their forces were beaten in Champagne by King Charles the Bald of West Francia, but they regrouped and continued their raids. By 856, Berno had established a fortified camp on the island of Oisel, near Rouen, a stronghold he would hold for years. From this base, Berno's Vikings terrorized the region. They raided as far as Bayeux and Evreux. The local Frankish nobles seemed powerless to stop them. In the winter of 856 to 857, they sacked Paris itself. This was not the Bjorn of legend, raiding for glory. This was a pragmatic warlord, building a fortified base, extracting tribute, and playing politics with the Frankish king. It was warfare, but it was also business. Then, in 858, something unexpected happened. Berno went to meet King Charles the Bald at the Palace of Verberie. The Annals Bertiniani record, Berno, leader of the faction of Pirates of the Seine, pursuing King Charles, came to the palace in Verberie and, giving him his hands, swore fidelity to him. What does this mean? Berno, almost certainly Bjorn, performed an act of commendation, swearing loyalty to the Frankish king. In return, he probably received tribute, the so-called Danegeld. This was a shrewd move. Charles the Bald was desperate to buy off the Vikings who were devastating his kingdom. For Bjorn, it was a way to secure wealth without fighting. He became, in effect, a mercenary in Frankish service. The deal was not popular with everyone. In November 858, the bishops of West Francia wrote to King Louis the German, complaining about the tribute paid to the Vikings, almost certainly referring to Bjorn and his men. But Bjorn's loyalty, if he ever truly intended it, did not last. Later that year, King Charles besieged Bjorn's fortress at Oisel. The siege failed. The Vikings defended it with such vigor that Charles was forced to withdraw, his kingdom threatened by invasion from his brother Louis. After this, Bjorn's name disappears from Frankish sources. But the Viking raids on the Seine continued, led by others. Where did Bjorn go? The answer lies in the greatest adventure of his life, the Mediterranean expedition of 859 to 862. In 859, Bjorn and Hastein did something no Vikings had ever done before. They led a fleet of 62 ships through the Strait of Gibraltar into the Mediterranean Sea. Their goal, according to later legends, was nothing less than Rome itself. The Eternal City, the heart of Christendom, the greatest prize any Viking could imagine. But first, they had to get there. The journey would take 3 years and test them to their limits. They began by raiding the coast of Spain, first Galicia and Asturias, then the Emirate of Córdoba. The Moors were not easy prey. At Nibla near Huelva, they were defeated. When they entered the Guadalquivir River, perhaps aiming for Seville, the Moorish fleet attacked with incendiary weapons. Several longships were burned. True to Viking tactics, they moved on when resistance was too strong. At Algeciras, near Gibraltar, they achieved complete surprise. They sacked the town and burned its main mosque. Then came the passage through the straits. This was dangerous. The straits are only 9 miles wide, easily guarded. The Moors were waiting. In a desperate battle, Bjorn lost 40 ships, many to Greek fire launched from catapults. Only 20 ships remained. But they were through. They had entered the Mediterranean, a new world, full of opportunity and danger. Once through the straits, Bjorn and Hastein turned south, landing on the African coast near modern Melilla. They plundered freely for a week, capturing the harem of a local ruler and ransoming it back to the Emir of Córdoba for a huge sum. They also captured some black Africans, people they called Blamen, blue men. The Vikings found them so exotic that they kept some as curiosities, eventually selling them as slaves in Ireland. From Africa, they returned to Spain, raiding the coast of Mercia and then the Balearic Islands. Everywhere they went, they left a trail of destruction and returned with ships full of treasure. Then they sailed north, up the coast of France, sacking Narbonne and wintering on an island in the Camargue, the marshy delta of the Rhône. In the spring, they sailed over 100 miles up the Rhône, sacking Nîmes, Arles, and Valence. The Franks eventually gathered an army and defeated them in battle. Bjorn and Hastein decided it was time to move on. They sailed east, along the Côte d'Azur, heading for Italy. They had already achieved more than any Viking expedition before them. But the greatest test, and the greatest legend, still lay ahead. In 860, Bjorn and Hastein landed in Italy. They captured the coastal city of Pisa, a rich prize, and then continued south, looking for more. According to legend, they had a specific target in mind, Rome. But when they came to the walled town of Luni, in Liguria, they mistook it for the Eternal City. Now, Luni was not Rome. It was a modest port, once prosperous in Roman times, but now a shadow of its former self. Could anyone really have mistaken it for the capital of Christendom? Probably not, but it makes a good story. The problem was that Luni's walls were too strong to storm. Bjorn's army was battle-hardened, but they had no siege engines. They needed another way in. This is where Hastein's cunning came into play. According to the Norman chronicler Dudo of St. Quentin, writing in the early 11th century, Hastein devised a brilliant ruse. He sent messengers to the Bishop of Luni, claiming that he, Hastein, was deathly ill. On his deathbed, he had converted to Christianity and wished to be baptized, and, after his death, to be buried on consecrated ground within the city walls. The bishop, perhaps hoping to save a pagan soul, agreed. A solemn procession approached the gates of Luni. Priests and townspeople gathered to witness the conversion and burial of the Viking chieftain. Hastein was carried on a stretcher, apparently at death's door. He received baptism, or so the bishop thought. Then, to complete the charade, he died. His body was prepared for burial, and the procession entered the city, carrying the coffin to the church. Inside the church, the ceremony began. But as the mourners prayed, Hastein suddenly leapt from the coffin, very much alive, and grabbed a sword hidden beneath his shroud. His men, also armed, threw off their disguises. In the confusion that followed, the Vikings butchered the bishop and his clergy, opened the city gates, and let the rest of the army in. Luni was sacked. When Hastein learned that this was not Rome, but a minor town, he was reportedly furious. According to some versions of the story, he ordered the massacre of Luni's entire male population. This story was so compelling that it was later attributed to other Norman leaders, Robert Guiscard, Bohemond of Taranto, Roger I of Sicily. It became a template for medieval trickery, a testament to the Viking reputation for cunning as well as courage. Whether it actually happened is debated, but it became part of the legend of Björn Ironside, a legend that would carry his name down the centuries. After the sack of Luni, Bjorn and Hastein continued raiding. They moved down the Tuscan coast, sacking Fiesole above Florence. Then, for about a year, they disappear from the sources. What did they do in that year? Some later Arabic and Spanish sources claim that Vikings raided Greece and even Alexandria. If so, it was probably Bjorn's and Hastein's fleet, pushing further east than any Vikings before them. But eventually, they had to go home. In 861, the surviving ships, only 20 of the original 62, passed through the Strait of Gibraltar once more. This time, the Moors were ready. The straits are narrow, and the current flows constantly from the Atlantic into the Mediterranean. Against this current, the Vikings made slow progress, giving the Moorish fleet plenty of time to intercept them. In the desperate battle that followed, the Vikings lost more ships. Only 20 escaped, less than a third of those who had set out 3 years earlier. But the survivors were rich. They had looted cities, ransomed captives, and gathered treasure beyond imagining. For them, the expedition had been a success. Before leaving Spanish waters, Bjorn and Hastein made one last raid. They attacked the small Christian kingdom of Navarre, and sacked its capital, Pamplona. In a spectacular coup, they captured King Garcia I himself. The king's ransom was enormous, 70,000 gold dinars, roughly 308 kilograms of gold. It was the crowning achievement of the expedition, proof that Viking audacity could still pay off. The survivors returned to the Loire in 862, rich men. After the expedition, Bjorn and Hastein parted ways. Hastein stayed on the Loire, where he had a long and profitable career ahead of him. Bjorn headed back to Denmark, perhaps intending to use his wealth and reputation to claim a throne. But fate had other plans. According to the Norman chronicler William of Jumiages, Bjorn was shipwrecked on the English coast. He barely survived, losing everything. He eventually made his way to Frisia, where he died. The exact circumstances are unknown, but the legend says he ended his days there, far from the glory of his youth. The historical Bjorn may have died in Frisia, but in the sagas, his story continued. According to the tale of Ragnar's sons, after Ragnar's death in the snake pit of King Aella, Bjorn joined his brothers in seeking revenge. They attacked Aella in England, but were beaten back. Ivar then used his cunning. He asked Aella for only as much land as he could cover with an ox's hide, swearing never to wage war against him. Aella agreed, and Ivar cut the hide into such fine strands that he could envelop the entire city of York. He built a fortress there and made himself popular with the English. Then Ivar sent for his brothers. In the new battle, Ivar sided with them, and many English chieftains, loyal to Ivar, joined as well. Aella was captured, and the brothers carved the blood eagle upon him, the ultimate revenge for their father. This story, like so many saga tales, blends history and legend. But it shows how Bjorn was remembered as a loyal brother, a fierce warrior, and a key figure in the greatest revenge story of the Viking Age. The sagas give Bjorn a different ending from the historical sources. According to the tale of Ragnar's sons, after the conquest of England, Bjorn and his brothers pillaged across Europe, England, Wales, France, and Italy, until they came to the town of Luna. Then they returned to Scandinavia and divided the kingdom. Björn Ironside took Uppsala and Sweden. The Hervarar saga confirms this tradition, stating that after the death of Eystein Belli, Bjorn and his brothers conquered all of Sweden. When Ragnar died, Bjorn inherited Sweden. He had two sons, Refil and Erik Bjornsson, who became the next king of Sweden. In the early 18th century, a large barrow on the island of Munso, in Lake Mälaren, was identified by antiquarians as Bjorn Jarnsida's hog, Bjorn Ironside's grave. Whether it actually contains his bones, we cannot know. But the barrow stands as a testament to the power of his legend. For centuries, the Swedes believed that their royal dynasty, the House of Munso, traced its ancestry back to Bjorn Ironside, son of Ragnar, brother of Ivar, and the Viking who almost conquered Rome. So, who was the real Bjorn Ironside? The historical Bjorn, or Berno, as the Frankish sources call him, was a Viking chieftain who raided the Seine Valley in the 850s. He built a fortified camp at Oisel, sacked Paris, and extracted tribute from the Frankish king. He was a pragmatist, willing to swear loyalty to Charles the Bald when it suited him. The legendary Bjorn, the Bjorn of the sagas, was the son of Ragnar Lothbrok, the brother of Ivar the Boneless, the scourge of the Mediterranean. He sacked cities in Italy, tricked his way into Luni, and became king of Sweden. His descendants ruled for centuries. Which one is true? The answer, as with so many Viking figures, is both. The Mediterranean expedition is real. It is confirmed by Frankish, Norman, Arab, Scandinavian, and Irish sources. Bjorn and Hastein did lead a massive raid into the Mediterranean in 859 to 862. They did fight Moors, sack cities, and return with enormous wealth. The trick at Luni may be legend, or it may be based on a real event. The story is too good to be true, but it captures something essential about the Viking spirit. The willingness to use cunning when force fails, the audacity to think beyond the obvious, the courage to risk everything for a prize beyond imagination. Why do we remember Bjorn Ironside today? Part of it is the adventure. The Mediterranean expedition was one of the most daring Viking voyages ever undertaken. It took them through hostile waters, against powerful enemies, into lands they had never seen. They faced Moorish fleets, Frankish armies, and the treacherous currents of Gibraltar. They lost most of their ships, but the survivors came home rich beyond measure. Part of it is the trick at Luni. Whether true or not, the story of Hastein leaping from the coffin captured the medieval imagination. It was retold for centuries, attributed to other leaders, becoming a symbol of Viking cunning. Part of it is the connection to Ragnar and his sons. Bjorn was part of a family that became legendary, a family whose story has been told and retold, from the medieval sagas to modern television. The name, Ironside, evokes an image of invincibility, of a warrior who could not be stopped. And part of it is the legacy. The Swedish kings believe they descended from Bjorn. The barrow at Munso still stands. His name lives on in place names, in stories, in the DNA of millions of people who trace their ancestry back to the Vikings. Bjorn Ironside was a real man, a Viking chieftain who lived and died in the 9th century. But he became something more, a symbol of Viking daring, a legend that would outlast him by more than 1,000 years. And that, perhaps, is the greatest achievement of all. From the rivers of France to the shores of the Mediterranean, Bjorn Ironside's journey was one of the most extraordinary in Viking history. He was a raider and a trader, a warrior and a strategist, a son of legend and a king of men. He fought Moors and Franks, sacked cities and captured kings, and came home with treasure beyond imagining. His story reminds us that the Vikings were not just barbarians. They were explorers, adventurers, and entrepreneurs. They were willing to risk everything for glory and gold, and sometimes they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Bjorn Ironside may have died in Frisia, far from the lands he conquered, but his legend lived on, in the sagas, in the royal dynasties of Sweden, and in the memory of a voyage that took Vikings where no Vikings had gone before. The Mediterranean expedition of 859 to 862 was a turning point. It showed that Vikings could go anywhere, fight anyone, and return with their ships full of treasure. It opened new horizons, new possibilities, new dreams. And it cemented Bjorn Ironside's place among the greatest Viking leaders of all time. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Echoes of History. Next time, we'll continue our journey through the Viking world, perhaps to meet another son of Ragnar, or to explore another legendary voyage. Thank you for listening.